This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast, with George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean, the CRM Hobbit Tabor.
This episode of CRM Audio is sponsored by Alexa CRM. WordPress powers more than 25% of all the websites on the internet and is the number one choice for blogs, websites, and portals because it's open source, simple to use, reliable, and extendable. Dynamics CRM has become a de facto standard in sales, marketing, customer service, and industry solutions. Now they can work together thanks to the Dynamics CRM WordPress plugin built with love by the Alexa CRM team. Capture forms, engage your users and customers, all without writing any code. Control your site in WordPress, keeping your data in CRM. To build the plugin, Alexa CRM has created an open-source Dynamics CRM PHP toolkit, unlocking the world of Dynamics for PHP developers. Download your 30-day trial from alexacrm.com/plugin and instantly create a portal by connecting your CRM and WordPress site. We thank Alexa CRM for their sponsorship of CRM Audio.
Good afternoon, George. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good afternoon. Good evening, Joel. I'm good. It's a new week. I suppose it's the end of the week for you. So it's
or the beginning of the week. So let's see. I think it feels like we're on the cusp of having...
Wait a minute. Before we start with CRM, now let's get one thing out of the way. You said beginning of the week. Is it because you consider Sunday to be the first day of the week? Is it? What's the deal with that? What's the deal with starting week with the break?
I don't know. I mean, are you saying Australian calendars don't begin with Sunday?
Well, I think historically people did that, but now traditionally calendars mean Monday to Sunday.
Because when it's Sunday night, my mind is already thinking through all the things I have to do on Monday morning. So it feels like I'm at the beginning of the week.
So what's new?
The only news story that I'm aware of, I think in about a week or two, we'll have a lot more to talk about with the details of the fall release for CRM 2016. I guess the fall 2016 release, which I guess we might call CRM 2017. I'm not sure. One big news is the backup and restore your CRM Online instances. And this is the ability for on-demand backups of your CRM Online environments. This has been something that has both production and sandbox environments. Users can now back up their data. System backups are happening once a day, and those don't count against your storage quota. So I guess that's once a day we have a backup.
You can restore them into a sandbox. Nothing else. People ask, can we download? Can we import them on premises? The answer is basically no. There is no way to download. Having said that, I believe that if you raise a support request with CRM Online support, you can get a backup copy of your database.
If you have that one user that accidentally deletes half your contacts, or that runs a data update and mismaps the fields, and so they rewrite the last name to the wrong field, to the wrong record, which I had that happen to a client. I didn't do it, but I had it happen to a client where they had their matching criteria off, and all of a sudden they were updating from a source, and all of a sudden everybody had the wrong last name.
Nice.
When that kind of thing happens, now we can say let's restore the last backup, and then maybe using Kingsway Soft or Scribe, we can.
You don't actually need Kingsway Soft or Scribe, because now you have ability to flip the flag on your production instance and say it's my sandbox, and then restore there and flip the switch back and say it's now production. Obviously, for obvious reasons, that wouldn't be the best way to go, but it is still possible. So the best way to go is to restore into a separate instance, make sure it's working, it's all fine, and then basically swap the instance out. So In addition to the system
Oh, I
one?
see. So you can take your production environment, flip the switch, say this is a sandbox, then
Yeah.
you can restore the backup to that environment, and then flip it back to your production environment.
Yeah. But for a time being, you're going to be up in the air with no production environment at all. So I would say use the second instance if you really care about your data. Make sure that everything in place. Now, having said that, I see, well, it's obvious use, restore from the stuff ups. But you can also do user initiated backups and restore. You can do those whenever you feel like it. And so far, there are no limits how many backups you can do. They still going to store them for 3 days. So that's a couple of things that been clarified since the article came out. They still store in backups only for 3 days, but it still works if you're doing major upgrade. What you can do, you can take the backup, you do your upgrade. If something goes wrong, you can restore it back. So that's the primary purpose of this backup. Like before you do something.
So that's if I'm going to update my environment to the fall release or something, because it only works.
For example, or you install in some
later.
massive solution, or you're doing some data migration, and you really want to have a checkpoint. So that's So that's the objective. And I was told, I believe I incorrectly assumed that it does count against your storage. Since then, I received notification that no, it doesn't actually. Neither of backups count. But I guess they can afford that for two reasons. Why? Reason one is it's only 3 days that they store. And reason number two, they're very smart about how backups are done. It's not just, full database backup as is. So it's either incremental or transaction log backup. So it's really done smartly using SQL Server, the available SQL Server facilities to save storage space. So,
right.
Yeah. So I'd be very interested to see where it goes. What else you can do with it? Can you use, as some people express, say, if you provide Azure storage from your subscription, can you put backup there and have it permanently there? Like for whatever, for accounting reasons, like accountants, like end of financial year, you do the backup of everything as it was. So,
I think there's a lot of people who'd be interested in the ability to download the backups, or to be able to automatically download them to their data warehouse or whatever.
That would be
something
interesting.
Scheduled. It happens once a day, and you can automatically get it. So for on-premise data retention purposes, those types of things. But just having the ability to schedule and do on-demand backups is a great thing. And again, one by one, the complaints that people had or the reasons for staying on-premise are going away now.
Tell me, I don't know much about Salesforce. I have to admit, I never poked around too much. Especially not lately. Does Salesforce have anything like that? Does it have ability to do at least checkpoints that you can roll back?
I haven't checked lately, but I know that they did have the ability to do an on-demand backup and also download the data, but that depended on your license type. I think if you had the equivalent of an enterprise license, you could download it basically as many times as you wanted to, versus a professional type license. You were limited to only one download every so often, but that may have changed. This is a couple of years back. I do know when I did more data migrations, we would have some clients that we had to connect directly to Salesforce because they couldn't get a download, where others could get a download, and the preference there was to do a migration from a downloaded copy because it was faster, and also because Salesforce had some mechanisms to recognize when you were moving a high amount of data and to severely throttle you as well. but I haven't checked in a couple of years.
Interesting. That's not the only thing that came out lately in CRM Online management. The other thing is that you can now geofence your CRM.
Okay.
That came out like literally a couple of days ago. If you recall, I'm going to do a post on CRM tip of the day, summing it up, but quite some time ago, like literally maybe a year and a half ago, I did the post how to do geofencing on your CRM on-premises instance and stay supported.
Is that to only allow people inside a certain geographical area to access your environment?
Yeah, basically you have rules that you could use it for geofencing, or you can nail it to a specific range of IP addresses, let's say only from your office, and so on.
Now, I thought that Office 365 already had something like that, because I know people who wanted to limit CRM Online access or something like that to only people from a certain IP range. But I'm not sure. I thought Office 365 already
the requirements
had
are still kind of beyond your average, 5-user deployment, because you need to have a subscription to Azure Active Directory Premium. You need to have federated or managed Azure Active Directory tenant, and federated tenants require multi-factor authentication. Having said that, you can create groups, you can put rules in place and restrict it to certain IP addresses. I haven't played with that. I will report what it looks like. On premises, the story is, I wouldn't say, it's a bit more straightforward. I wouldn't say simpler, but the idea is that on premises you use a very nice feature of IIS, application request router, and you set up your endpoint being on this IIS machine, which does nothing else but routes it to CRM on premises. And then what you do, you can put your IP rules on that machine. So that way your CRM machine or machines, they stay supported, because you don't touch web.config, you don't modify your deployment, you just routing requests to that machine. So it works fine. We use it. We use it for a couple of clients who are sensitive about where their data accessed from, and it works just fine. So I guess it's very similar for CRM Online. So which leads me to an interesting story. If you haven't been following it, in Australia we had census not so long ago, and as any census requires, as any census in any country, the idea is that you collect as much information about census as possible in a given time frame. So that the idea was like a Tuesday night, you go online and you complete the census, and basically it was a huge stuff up. So first it was like denial of service, then it wasn't denial of service, and then it was internal. It was attacked from inside Australia, and then it wasn't, and just basically it was really fun to watch. And if you want to read about it, it's funny read. But if you want to listen to actual details what happened, I can't recommend enough the podcast. It's some Australian guys run. It's risky.biz. It's a security podcast, and the guys just tear that all apart. IBM got paid like $9 million to create all the environment, and they said, yeah, we're gonna do geofencing, we're gonna do this and that, and denial of service. We don't need denial of service because we're gonna do geofence, and that all fell apart really quickly. And I wonder if we're gonna see IBM ever getting any massive government project in Australia ever again. It was like massive fail. But yeah, that's speaking of geofencing. Don't rely on it. It's not a security measure, right? So it's gonna stop kind of people poking around. But it's
and if you really want to, and I'm not encouraging anybody to do this, but for example, I have certain shows on that are BBC shows that I've been really interested in. Of course, they come out in England before they come out in US, and I've been able to find very easy proxies or firewalls that you can set up that spoof you being in the wrong, like use a proxy in London or something. And I've been able to use the BBC streaming service in the US as well. So none of that stuff is really foolproof.
Yeah, exactly. So basically the idea was that it's going to stop curious people poking around. It's never going to stop some serious hackers.
If you want to keep somebody like Gus Gonzalez from looking in your environment, maybe, but not somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Exactly. The whole idea of geofencing led me to thinking about how CRM Online environment is being protected, because we don't know too many details about it, and I suppose it's a good thing. But I believe it would be quite resilient to things like denial of service attack and things like that, because it's out there in the open. Come and get it, right? So,
if you let me ask you this though: if you really want to prevent people outside of IP range or outside of geography from getting to your environment, can't you really do that just by using single sign-on and limiting who can get to your ADFS sign-in page?
That's pretty much what I believe what CRM Online is doing. So
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, that's two fairly big news stories, and again, great things that a lot of, especially enterprise or security conscious clients, have been asking for: the ability to back up your data on demand and also to geofence. So that's good stuff. Well, I was looking back, and it's been a couple episodes since we've had a guest. George, I think we should try and get a guest like David Yak or Leon Tribe on sometime. Get a good guest.
Boring. Really? David Yak and Leon Tribe? By the way.
Or we have Gus Gonzalez. Oh, hi, Gus.
Come on. Like, I have social engagement. He just alerted me that you mentioned my name with a negative, I guess comment attached to it. So I'm here. What's up?
You sense that the Gus Gonzalez social sentiment was dropping.
It's awesome. You got to try it.
To drop it, yeah, it was dropping.
It can only go up from here.
Exactly.
That's a good news.
So now that I'm here,
Gus actually is on every episode we have. We just never get time to bring him in, so he kind of busts.
Running out of time. Running out of time. But now that I'm here, I figured, since I know I can do a much better job than you guys anyway at hosting the show, so I'm going to take over and start asking you questions instead. I mean, I think people out there that listen to this podcast are interested on knowing more about you. I mean, you guys keep having guests, obviously, and asking all these interesting questions, but I don't think anyone has ever asked you questions. So I'm going to go ahead and see what this is all about. So the first question I have really is, who came up with the idea of this podcast series?
Going back maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. First of all, I've been a long-time listener of podcasts, and I really enjoy the format, especially when I'm driving or flying on an airplane. It just amazes me how many different ideas there are out there, how many people are doing it. And my background, I was actually, at one time, was going to go into radio broadcasting. This is back 20-some years ago. But I realized that, that's not exactly a growing market. So instead I moved into originally marketing and sales and then into technology and CRM. But I've always had kind of a interest in that. And so about 2 years ago, I had a friend who asked me, so Joel, how do I do a podcast? He just assumed I knew. And I said, I know the main pieces, but the specifics of how you get something listed on iTunes and how how do you serve that up and that type of thing, I wasn't quite sure. So I decided to figure it out. And so I've started my own personal podcast, If You're Like Me, which is basically a friend of mine and I being idiots pretending we're experts at stuff. And so by doing that, I kind of learned what works, what doesn't work, and how the mechanics of it, how to get podcasts listed on different services like iTunes and Switcher and other things like that. And
so essentially on that podcast you mentioned with your friend, you're basically two idiots pretending you're experts and talking about stuff. So you said, let's just do that with CRM. Let me get another idiot.
So let's do that for CRM. And so I brought that up to my friend George, who I work with on CRM Tip of the Day, and he actually had already had registered some audio type URLs out there. So since he's the WordPress expert, deferred to him with setting up the site. We went with Libsyn for the host. You can actually host your own podcast, through your own RSS feed, but it's messy. There's a lot of stuff that a good podcast host like Libsyn that makes a lot easier, where you basically just need to upload the show. One of the best things, though, that I think we did was using FeedBurner for the feed. That's one of the things that I've learned is, even if you use a host like Libsyn, use a FeedBurner or control your own RSS feed. Basically, by doing that, if you get fed up with the service you're on, you can easily move it to a different host. So I've learned a lot through the process. I've learned what works, doesn't work. I'm a big fan of editing. So each episode is probably 25% longer, but I edit out the boring stuff. George, myself, or Sean will start rambling. I've found that's also a better way to get people to be guests on the show if they totally mess up or say something that's out there or are wrong about something. It's not just going to go out raw. Especially if you're going to do a podcast, edit the beginning and the ending. In the middle, once you get going, people are more forgiving of ums. But if you start and you don't start strong and tight and solid, people are going to turn it off. Makes sense.
So like you mentioned, you had the idea to start the podcast, but how do you guys come up with ideas for like every show? I mean, I understand the news side of it is pretty straightforward. I mean, you pretty much depend on Microsoft and the rest of the industry for that. But what about guests and topics to talk about?
I guess since George and I are both in the MVP community, there's a lot of good guests out there, and we've been cycling through them. I think we've had Mitch on twice, and it's usually some of it's topical. So like when the web API came out, Mitch was the first person I thought of, because he's somebody that is always kind of ahead of the curve on the SDK side of things. Some of it's very topical, but also there's just a lot of people I really admire, and this format gives me the chance to talk to them and get in deep with them. For people, for example, Scott Durow, Tanguy, Neil Benson, people like that. Just being able to talk with them, get their ideas, find out what they're doing. I love hearing from people how they work, because that gives me ideas and gives other people ideas. And to me, it's kind of, I want to capture what we have at the MVP Summit. Gus, as you know, when we're at the MVP Summit and you're just chilling out with, or you're in a session with George and Leon and other things like that. And
smart people too.
Yeah, some smart people, yeah. It's fun, but it's also, there's just so many brains out there that you can learn a lot from. And part of this is also, one of my philosophies in life is that if I want to learn something, I need a deadline or something that will motivate me to do it. I either need to teach people about it, or write a blog post about it, or do a podcast about it. And that's the kind of thing. And things are changing so rapidly now that having this thing every 2 weeks, where I know that I need to be informed about these things and be able to talk and express an opinion about it, and look at not just, oh, look at this cool thing that's coming, but like, why does this matter?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I feel we can be a little bit more honest. We're not restrained. We're restrained by the NDA, but we try and be fair.
But what about you, George?
What about me? I just like talking. So when Joel floated the idea, I was all over it. domain
So
came.
how do you end up? How do you end up here as a CRM expert? What was your path? Was it do you set out to be into CRM, or was it an accident? How do you end up being a CRM expert?
You have to roll back probably 15, 16 years ago. We've been working on the product, which I would say was somewhat similar to Microsoft, to Dynamics CRM, in sense that it did allow people to create entities and edit them and put some business spin on it, so to speak. And we actually the story goes that we ended up at Microsoft pitching the product to Microsoft in what year was that? I think end of 90s. Anyway, it didn't work out. I guess we've been lucky that we were even given the opportunity to pitch the product, because you can only imagine that how many people have this opportunity, and it's only a small percentage. How many people would love for their product to be looked at? So that was kind of inspiring in one sense, and deflating in another, that we didn't make the cut, so to speak. Long story, but the idea of kind of user-friendly designing your own thing, and all the database, underlying details, including security, permissions, are taken care of, and interface kind of builds itself out of the box as you construct your business model. The very idea of that was kind of appealing. I never looked at CRM version 1.2, but when the version 3 came out, I was kind of in the middle of the road, deciding what do I want to do next. I've been doing ASP.NET with moderate success for some time. I was looking for something new and challenging, and here you go. In that was 2006, I think. I took a long look at CRM and said, well, it's kind of, I like where it's going, so let's see if we can do something with it, and then kind of never look back. So
nice.
So to summarize, CRM was George's idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I was stolen by Microsoft. Yes.
Exactly. You were the brain behind it. So I know that asking you guys what a typical day looks for you would be useless, because every day is different, but what is, I guess, from all the things you do for work, I know that there are things outside of work, but for all the things you do at work, what is your favorite thing? Like that thing that you enjoy the most, and what is your least favorite thing? Starting with you, Joel.
My job has changed some in the last year or so. Up until about a year ago, I was a senior architect, which meant I was involved with a lot of projects from a, very hands-on, getting my hands dirty in the projects kind of thing. And so I've always liked that, but I moved into a consulting principal role, which means now I'm not just worried about the work I do. I'm worried about the work that the 10 people on my team and the people on my projects are doing. And so I like to challenge myself and move to new areas. So to me, though, one of the things that I've always enjoyed is helping other people grow and be more successful. So helping them, solve challenges. So, for example, if they were stuck in a project or like had a challenge with a client in a scenario that they couldn't figure out, helping them think through how to do it. And so I try not to, though, just give them the answer. If you get really good at being a solution architect, it's very tempting for you to try and take over everything. Like, I'm going to step aside, let the expert do it. But I want to help others learn to fish and be successful. And so when I've seen some of my colleagues who have gone from being more junior consultants to be senior level resources, that's good. So I love to mentor people, help them grow in their career and doing what they're doing.
Nice. How about you, George?
Because I'm doing a lot of training and creation of the materials for training and talk at the conferences, I enjoy challenges or exploring new things and solving puzzles and doing some interesting scenarios in CRM. exploring new things. That's probably the most exciting part of what I do. Like, just to give you an example, I've been poking recently with new Azure things, like can we use Azure functions within CRM solution? Not exactly like that, but kind of you get the idea. So can we delegate some work to Azure functions, which meaning that you don't need to set up a server, you don't need to set up anything, right? You just write your code and you just use it. So that could be.
So you're basically coming up with a new product that Microsoft can steal from you again.
No, not quite, because Azure Functions, that's not my product, that's Azure product. But the idea is that exploring new things, kind of new grounds, challenging what we can do with CRM. That's probably most favorite part. My least favorite part is, I suppose, being interrupted when I'm on a roll and when I'm doing so. But because, research part doesn't quite pay directly, being interrupted is a necessary evil, because you're doing some real life projects, you're doing some customer service, and people come to you with the problems, real life problems, unlike the imaginary problems that I put in front of myself with the Azure functions and things like that. So, and I suppose you have to play nice because they're customers. So, and love or hate them, they're people who would pay you money if you do your job right. So,
right.
Now, how much of your time is spent with training, though? Because you still do a fair amount of training, don't you?
Yeah, it depends. We come into season when we prepare the training and then we deliver it in bursts, I suppose. So in September, most of my time can be spent delivering training. But at the same time, I have to balance it with running my own business and working on the product and preparing for the conferences. And then we'll have batch of conferences coming up. So,
that's one thing I wanted to ask, because we have CRMUG Summit coming up. I think, well, except for Ignite, I think that will be or whichever the one that is coming up in September for Microsoft. Those are some of the conferences that are coming up later this year. We also have Extreme. So, that's one of the things that people ask me sometimes, because I also go to conferences once in a while, but they, you meet people once in a while, especially customers too, that they ask you, hey, I want to go to a conference. I've never been to one. Is there one that you recommend? So I guess the question for both of you is, since you have been to pretty much all of them, what would you say to anyone wondering if it's worth it, going to conferences, and which one would you recommend?
I would say for most clients or most people who use CRMUG is probably the number one, I would say, because there's so much and it's constantly growing. And if you want to get exposure to and in deep into CRM, that's the place to go. If you're a developer or something else, these others are good. Extreme as well is good, but I think CRMUG, and just especially if you're a user, that's probably where my focus would be.
I have to agree, and even for developers, if I have to recommend one conference, I would say CRMUG, particularly that we now don't have a conference on the business level. So what was the name of the conference earlier this year? Envision?
Envision.
Yeah, I was a bit of a letdown from what I heard from people. So I expect CRMUG grow big this year. For developers, if you are after kind of level 400 content, definitely Extreme CRM. But I also say watch this space on Ignite, because I truly hope that we will be at some point embraced back into developers community as equal, because we were lost for a few years. we used to go to TechEd, and we used to have sessions, CRM sessions at TechEd, and then it's been dropped out. Even Zune stayed on. They dropped out Dynamic CRM. Zune was there as a track. So at that point, I said, you know what? That's it. I'm not coming to TechEd anymore. And now on Ignite, I think a couple of people going to talk at Ignite about CRM. Julie Yak is doing talk about sales in CRM.
I saw that. And the one thing that you mentioned is obviously that there's some training happening within these conferences, and I know that you guys have delivered training before, but I'm curious. I'm curious to know: are you guys also students? Like, do you go to training sessions yourself? What was the last one you attended, or which one do you want to attend in the future?
I would say that if I have time, I will. Last year I didn't get a chance to, but I will. If there's something especially, I'll tell you the things that I would look for this year are, since these conferences are coming right at the cusp of when the new version's coming out, that's a great way to learn deeper knowledge about what the new functionality is and what it means.
I don't go to classes anymore. I used to a long time ago. I don't attend classes. Sometimes I do attend virtual trainings, not all of them, but just the modules that are of particular interest. So I feel there is a gap. So I attend, let's say I'm going to deliver customer service training, advanced customer service, right? And it goes on for 2 weeks. So every day, like 3 hours for 2 weeks. So if I were to attend myself, I would probably pick like 1 or 2 and attend. Having said that, I do watch materials on Dynamics Learning Portal if I feel that there is a gap in my knowledge and I need to have like a basic understanding or just above the basic, like level 200 understanding of the subject. I always go to Dynamics Learning Portal. If there's a video there, level 200, that's the one I would watch. Just get some understanding of the topic. It's not going to give me a deep insight, but it gives me enough understanding so I can, support a cocktail conversation about it.
Derek Borman's videos for the Tipster Guide videos on the Tip of the Day site have been keeping me going lately.
Definitely.
Exactly. Yeah,
those are really good
myself. So.
And Dynamics Learning Portal is a great source. So for those of you listening, if you have access to it, dynamicslearningportal.com. Definitely a great place to learn. But, I know we've been talking for a while now about work and sort of what do you do for work. But let's step out for a second into more of your personal life. And I think personality is a big thing when you are in this industry because you're dealing with customers and you're dealing also with technical people at the same time. So I think your personality is important. So tell us something interesting that we don't know about you.
I was born on Elvis Presley's 40th birthday, so one magic power I have is I can always tell you how old Elvis would be at this time.
Nice trick.
81.
Yeah. How about you, George?
It's really hard. What do you want to know? I don't know. I've got, same degree as Leon. I'm Master of Science in mathematical physics. I used to blow atoms to pieces. Not a nuclear weapon, but we used to build a particle accelerator. Not quite the size of the CERN accelerator, but that's used to be in my past life, long time ago.
So I know you mentioned something, Joel, about traveling and listening to podcasts as well. I know you both travel a lot, so. I mean, do you like traveling? And if so, from all the places you've been, either personal or for business, what's your favorite place and what's your least favorite place? I think that's interesting to know as well.
Great. You want us to make a certain segment of our listeners angry by insulting their homes. Well, I find myself traveling very regularly. Last week I was in Toronto and I was also in Columbus, Ohio. And so these days I seem to have a lot of trips, but they're shorter trips. So I'm not typically going one place for a week, but I'll be going, sometimes one place for 2 days, or maybe two different places for 2 to 3 days. And so, I do enjoy it. I always try to find something local where I'm going, it being a unique store or restaurant, just so I can experience, where you are. Because it can get, going in and out of places, it can become a blur if you only see the airport and then where you're going for your meeting. So I like to find something unique to let me know the flavor. I really like Toronto. I've really been impressed with Toronto. Their traffic is terrible. I mean, you can't get anywhere in Toronto. I thought Atlanta was bad. Toronto is just as bad. And you can't get anywhere in Toronto in less than an hour, even if you're going a few kilometers. But I recommend if you go there, you get the Daniel Kai tour. Stop by and see Daniel at Kingsway Soft, and he's taken me to some interesting restaurants, and he gave me the tour of Lake Ontario, and so I think I definitely like Toronto. Probably where I don't like, I was not impressed with Reno. I mean, Reno is it feels very sad to me. You got all these glitzy casinos and then extreme poverty, and it just shows kind of both sides there, and just seeing people pouring all their money into the casino. I'm not here to say bad things about people who like to go to the casino for fun every now and then, but it's just that kind of place. Just I didn't necessarily enjoy my visit there.
For me, travel is exhausting, because any travel outside Australia is like literally, unless you're going to New Zealand, it's literally minimum 9 hours to get to Asia, or to US. It's like 14 hours just to get to LA. So to Europe, to any part in US or to any European city, it takes over 20 hours to get, and it's just exhausting. So when I do go, I tend to go for longer periods of time. I don't have luxury of 1-2 day travel. There's nowhere. Yeah, you can go to another 4 cities in Australia within 1 day, but how much fun you can have going there over and over. It's just the 4 cities. So I guess you guys like in US in terms of that you've got so many different cities, different cultures to explore just within your own country. But when I do go, there are a few places I'd like to visit. I was really impressed. I can't name my favorite, but all Northern European countries is just been outstanding. People, culture, food, the whole thing, hospitality, just the whole thing, just the whole package. And I can't name my favorite. It's just all of them. Netherlands, and then Danish people, and Sweden, and I suppose we're lucky to have close MVP community, because anywhere you go, there is either existing or ex-MVP who would take you around, show you, take a good care of you. So MVP community is really like second family. Anywhere you go, there will be someone you can call, you can catch up, who can show you the city and so forth. Least favorite?
How about your least favorite?
It's like family. You got weird cousins like Gus.
Hey.
What about?
Sure,
that show up on announced on your wedding day. Yeah.
If you go to Toronto, one of the things you have to do is go to a grocery store, because Toronto has the most weirdest and most amazing flavors of potato chips you will ever see. I always load up some weird, like poutine potato chips. Whoever thought of that? But I'll get some weird potato chips and bring them home and make my kids eat them and see if they're good or not.
Record them.
Yeah, that's always fun. But one of my pet peeves talking about travel is people who complain on social media about their flights getting delayed. because what I've realized is if I'm stuck at the airport and my plane is delayed for 3 hours, nobody really cares about that. But people are trying to garner sympathy by saying, "Poor me, I have to wait at the airport." So I like making fun of those people.
Yeah, it's like Louis C.K. made fun about that too, and he was talking about, yeah, okay, so you were delayed for 3 hours, and then what? You flew in the sky. You were sitting in a chair in the sky magically. Really, no one cares.
Right.
But so, George, what's your least favorite place?
Well, I have to say that I dislike most of the hotels in US, like chains. I'd be pressed to pick up, the worst of them, but I have to say that there are two parts to it. The one is hotels in general, and the second part is that I loathe your tipping system. I don't understand it. I believe it has no place, and it's just unique to US, and it's just ridiculous. And that's one of the reasons I dislike hotels, particularly in big cities like New York or anything like that. I'm planning to go to New York later this year. I'm looking at Airbnb. I'm not going to stay in any of the hotels. But I have to agree with Joel. Reno, as a city, I did enjoy parts of the city, but the place where we were staying, where the conference was, with casino and people burning money there, I guess I would get the same sad impression of Vegas. And people go to Vegas to have fun. I can't imagine having fun in Vegas. It just doesn't appeal to me. I would go to Vegas to see the show, for example, but the very idea of, burning money, and particularly for people who cannot afford it, like 90% of people in the casino in Reno, they are kind of people you can tell they can't afford that.
Right.
So yeah, that was probably least favorite. Yeah.
One thing interesting as I've been in Canada, everybody in Canada that I talk to, it seems like everybody loves Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they do. It's like their favorite place to go. Everybody you talk to in Toronto, Myrtle Beach, and people living in the part of the country we do, Gus, think of Myrtle Beach as a tacky dump.
That's like your breaking case of emergency destination.
Exactly.
Like, all right, we ran out of places. I guess let's go to Myrtle Beach again. Right?
Exactly.
That's what it's so odd.
Now that I have to go there to see for myself.
Yeah, exactly. Go enjoy it.
Just a bunch of pasty white Canadians. That's all it is.
Okay, so when you guys are not traveling or podcasting or working, do you have any hobbies? Like, what do you like doing?
I actually enjoy spending time with my kids. Like when they growing up fast. I was just sorting out through videos from last year, and it's amazing how they changed just in 1 year. And at the moments like this, you realize, God, you have to make use of all the time available. So I do like spending time with my family. We like traveling as a family. So we're having so much fun traveling to destinations, particularly in Asia. And as I said, Europe, it's kind of expensive and you have to plan 5-week trip. Otherwise, it's not worth it. And, Gus, you've been to Europe recently, right? So how long did it take for you to plan it all?
I think it's part of the experience, right? To plan all of that. But one thing that I like talking to you about is that, you have a daughter that is growing, right? She's a young woman now, and I have a daughter too, which is 9. So it's sort of like seeing, since we've met each other years ago, just seeing that evolution of how she grows. And I've met your daughter because you guys came here to Atlanta, and sort of like understanding how you deal with that, because right now I can't even imagine my daughter being as old as your daughter, which is still young, but it's sort of like I can even see that. So that side of it, of the family, we definitely relate on that.
Yeah, you blink and it's there. But
Exactly.
Apart from that, funny enough, I travel a lot, but keep low profile, and I play tennis. I like playing tennis, and We biking with my son a lot, and just literally just doing ordinary things. I think my professional life is exciting enough to settle for quite ordinary things.
Yeah, other than work and editing podcasts and editing out George's boring content, it's basically my family and my kids these days, where my son just turned 8, and this last weekend, my weekend was consumed putting together the 1,300 plus piece Lego Millennium Falcon. So that was exciting. We had a party at the water park. So it's that kind of stuff, and which I know we all have kids, and they take up a lot of time. But you're right. You blink and especially see the Facebook memories of 4 years ago, and it seems like yesterday. So it's a challenge, but it's fun too.
So really I was going to stay away from this subject, but effectively, Joel, you admitting you're doing the same thing as what I do. We use kids as an excuse to do things we never got around doing when we were kids, right? Like building a
exactly.
Lego piece.
Exactly. Well, being a dad, you learn all the things that you're supposed to know as a man, but you don't, like camping. I've had to figure out how to set up a tent. I never did camping when I was younger, but I've had to figure out this stuff. And
hold on,
not always good at it.
Did you use your CRM experience to do a trial run? So you set up a camp, a tent inside the living room, in 30 seconds. And
no, I set the tent up in the backyard, but the backyard sloped pretty severely, so we wake up at 2:00 in the morning. We're all scrunched up against the top of the bottom of the tent, and your neck cricked.
One thing you don't do in Australia, you don't camp outside anyway. Well, people do,
especially because everything in Australia is out to kill you, right?
Yeah, someone said that even insects in Australia wear knee pads.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. All right. So, you guys obviously do a lot of stuff and you spend time with your family. So how do you find the time to learn all this stuff that Microsoft keeps coming up with, which is awesome stuff, but how do you find time to learn and dive into it?
No, we just make stuff up.
We speculate.
You just pretend. Yeah. I guess it works like that, right?
I think, that's one of the reasons I'm motivated to have a podcast like this and write blog posts, is because I need something to force me to keep current. And I have this paranoia that I'm going to blink and all of a sudden I don't know anything about CRM. And so I'm not satisfied to let that happen. So, but we've talked about this in recent episodes where I don't think the days like in 2008 when I became an MVP, or I think you became an MVP about 5 years ago, Gus, right? I think those days where you could effectively be pretty much a subject matter expert at the whole thing, I think those are gone. I think you have to pick. I think you still can, there's a baseline of knowledge about the core platform and how to customize it and best practices around that. But I have not met anybody who can be an expert at field service, project service, voice of the customer, SSRS reports, document templates, all this stuff. You can be a generalist and know here's generally what it is, and then if you have a project, beef up on it. But you have to, I think, it's getting to where you need to choose your specialty and get really good at one or two things and have people. That's what I love working at Hitachi. We got people who I know are experts at certain things, other people who are really great with other things. So if I need something, I can assemble the right people together on a team and have a really good team for a client based on what they need. But being an architect, especially these days, is a lot more challenging, I think, than it was even 5 years ago, because you have to know a lot of what you knew 3 years ago is now different, and it's going to only accelerate. So you need to what I preach to my team is you need to be focused on the next project or what's coming 6 months from now. Because if you're not, you're going to find yourself increasingly left behind.
Joel was talking for so long, I lost the thread. What we're talking about?
How do you keep up with all the new
how
stuff?
we keep up?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. But listening to Joel and don't know. As I said,
Righty.
I like exploring new things. Sometimes it could be challenging to balance the love of exploring with the necessity of running the business, because no one's getting paid to explore unless lucky one and you get a job at Microsoft and like evangelist or similar, then you getting actually paid to play with things. But we getting paid indirectly by acquiring the experience before anyone else does. So it could be challenging, but that's what you do. You just keep poking around. But Joel was right. I give up on a few things. I thought I could keep up, but had to let them go. Like, don't ask me too much about social listening. I know the basics, but I have no idea.
Well, the first basic you should know is now called social engagement. So that's basic number one.
You see, that's good that you're keeping up with terminology. Yeah. As you see, I started with it a long time ago. So when it was social listening, same goes for marketing.
No, of course.
And a lot of other areas. And now we have these definite areas, well-defined areas, like Joel listed most of them, like field service, project services, portals, and so on. You can pick up the area and you run with it and you become expert in it. The challenge still remains who's going to do the integration. To do the integration, you do need to know a bit of everything. So you're lucky if you work at Hitachi, where you can snap your fingers and say, bring me PSA expert on a silver platter. But when you're small business like me or Gus, I believe you soon will be disqualified from the small business area, right? So you're growing like mad.
Nah, we're still far away from that, but yeah, we're up to 7 people now and continue to grow. We'll see where it goes. But
so since you're Elevate Solutions, does the 8th employee get something special?
Well, we actually call our employees elevators. I figure, so we become elevators here within the company. But yeah, elevator number 8. We have to think of something. Exactly. Okay, so one question, Joel, you mentioned that you became an MVP in 2009. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I want to spend a few minutes talking about the MVP program because I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are interested on sort of that side of the community, these sort of experts that I don't know right now what kind of MVPs we are. I keep calling myself a CRM MVP, but I think we're up to, I don't know.
We're business solutions MVPs, also known as BS MVPs. So yes, and it was 2008, and I started with Customer Effective, which later was acquired by Hitachi, in March of 2007, and I was intimidated because I had been a salesperson up to that point. I had dabbled in XML files and servers and things like that, but I didn't have a background in consulting or IT or anything like that. So I was frankly intimidated because I thought, wow, there's all these smart people and who have been doing professional service for years. I need to get good at this. And so I jumped into the forums, and this was even before I knew about the MVP program, and just basically figured out, in the forum, if you just are a moocher and ask questions but never shared any knowledge, people were less likely to help you. So I made it my goal to answer 1 or 2 questions every week, and then started blogging. And this was, frankly, our company back then was a little bit worried, like, oh, if we blog, we're going to give away all our secrets. And the realization that giving stuff and sharing tips is a much better way to attract people to your company than search engine optimization and the static website. And so by doing that, I just found that it added a lot to my career, and just got to meet a lot of nice people and learn a lot. And then as I learned things and figured things out, share what I knew. And then through that became an MVP about a year later in July of 2008. what I've encouraged people I've mentored who have become MVPs is just be a consistent participant. Contribute regularly. Don't be the person. And it's different in the age now. This was before Twitter and everything became popular. I think it's different now, and it's in some ways I think harder to set yourself apart. And I think it's also harder to become an MVP now. I think the bar has been raised by a lot of smart people like yourself and other people who've come on after George and I did. Not that we're not smart, but there's a lot of really brilliant people. But the one thing though that really jumps out at me when we're together as MVPs is no one in that room is good at everything. And while I wasn't a developer, I was better at things like SSRS reports than some of the people who were real developers. And some people who are strictly developers don't have the business analysis and other type of skill set quite as strong. So don't try and be somebody you're not. Don't try and imitate somebody. Just bring your own voice. In this age of Twitter, don't just retweet everything everybody else is retweeting. Try and write a blog post and say something new. And that's the whole thing with CRM Tip of the Day. A lot of people try and write long blog posts, and they're some are good at it. Yuka is extremely good at it. Some, frankly, are not. And so,
absolutely,
find what you're good at, and being consistent is more important than painting a masterpiece or building the Taj Mahal. If you do that one time, it doesn't do you any good. But if you consistently put out fresh, good content, and the more you do, the easier it becomes. Because, now I'm in a position where I have to, for example, RFP responses. I hate RFP responses, but they're a necessary evil. But I find a lot of times I'll have questions there that I've written a blog post in the past, and I can take some of the text I've done, not just copy and paste it, but I have a head start and basically a library of material that I've written. So there's just numerous ways that has helped me through my career.
And I think that's an important point that you mentioned about standing out there and how hard it is. But I think the downside to that, or I guess the opposite to that, is for people who stand out for the wrong reasons, right? And how hard it is then at that point to sort of turn it around. Like, there's a few people out there that we know as MVPs on the community that, are famous for the wrong reasons. They're famous for stealing content from other experts that they created from scratch. They are famous for either retweeting everything or just writing articles to basically say, look, here's my article about an article that somebody else wrote, like essentially adding no thoughts of their own. And I think
posting their great wisdom that isn't really that great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it will be interesting to hear from you guys and from George as well. How can people, like, if you're going to stand out and be an MVP, how can you do it for the right reasons instead of, for the wrong reasons? Because then taking it back is really hard.
I'm no match for a lot of MVPs in terms of originality, in terms of depth of the content. Gus, you're bilingual as well, so there are some language barriers as well. So we're not as proficient or not as expressive in the English language because it's not our mother tongue. So there is a lot of things that don't play well with what I want to do. But what I've been trying for years, I've always been trying to find my own expression, my own voice. I started, in fact, with Joel, I think we got MVP at the same time, right? So we've got 2008. It was July 2008. So
that was a good year.
Yeah, it was a good year for the community. That's right, especially months of July. So I started by literally, I owned forum, developer forum. Joel was playing in non-developer sandpit, and I basically owned the forums. And it was quite challenging because that was the time when Michael Hearn was around, and everyone knows that when he stepped into the room, like the rest of JavaScript developers would, fade into background. So that was kind of challenging. And then I got MVP. It came as a surprise. I wasn't doing it for that, but it came as a nice surprise. And then it became kind of a game of coming up with the next challenge. So I got fed up with the forums. At the same time, a lot of smarter people came on board who were sharper, knew the answer. I had to research for the answer sometimes. They were knowing the answer off the bat and answering quicker. So I can't compete with that. So I had to move on, and I had blog for a while. I was writing kind of thoughtful articles in developer world, some unusual things that I discovered and so forth. Then I decided that it's time to do, CRM Wiki on TechNet. And we started doing that, and Wiki got life of its own a couple years later. So again, it was kind of decision time and saying, yeah, okay, I've done my bit. I can't drag it on. So I've done my bit. There are smarter people who are doing it now. So I've done my job. Then we came up with the CRM tip of the day idea, and, me and Joel started it, and it was really exciting. Can we keep it up? And we kind of, there were ups and down times, and people came, people went. Now we have our regular YouTube channel. So we've got like lots and lots. I didn't check lately, but we've got a very solid number of subscribers. So you go like youtube.com/CRM tip of the day. So we've got our own Derek Borman came on board with weekly videos, and it was great. So we're looking like CRM audio is the next challenge. So the next one, for example, I'm kind of toying with the idea of explore instant articles on Facebook, because that's where people are. They spend time on Facebook. So I'm toying with the idea of pushing posts as instant articles on Facebook. There are certain criteria that you can pass. You need to pass to be able to do that. It's not like, I want to publish and you publish. So there's some challenge in that, though you need to submit samples of your articles. So there's kind of barrier of entry, but that would be cool, right? That's something different. So, and I kept telling people, find your area, find the area that you enjoy, something that you enjoy doing, and find the way to express yourself in a certain way. It could be familiar, familiar media like Twitter and things like that. And we all know, for example, Gus, you just employed someone who carved a niche for himself, right? You employed Chart Guy, who's been on podcasts, right? So that's awesome. He decided he wants to be an expert. He enjoys the area, and he absolutely made a name for himself to be an absolute expert, subject matter expert, and he expressed himself well.
Yeah, that's
very, very smart guy who has listened to every episode of CRM Audio, by the way.
That's a guy that definitely stands out for the absolutely right reasons, right? Found a way to do it right, I think. And I think like Ulrich, the CRM chart guy, there are people out there that are not necessarily Microsoft MVPs who are, in our opinion, MVPs, or very important for the community at least. So can you guys name a couple of people who, in your opinion, are very important to the community, whether they're MVPs or not?
Well, I would say, and this ties into the last question, as far as voices in the community, the ones that stand out to me are the ones who are good at not just answering the question what, but answering the question why. And so my advice to anybody who wants to be an MVP, or maybe he doesn't want to be an MVP but wants to develop their voice and be a subject matter expert, is don't try and be CNN breaking news or headline news or whatever and say, here's this cool new thing, here's what it is. Everybody's doing that. Very few are saying and here's why it matters. So, for example, you can find a lot of posts right now about voice of the customer, how it works, but very few that are tying it into best practices for surveys and what's a survey. Maybe taking some stuff like Seth Godin writes about what makes a good survey and why does this matter and how do you really use it. And so I think people like, I always like people like Yuka and people like Adam Varro whose blog posts don't just talk about here's this great new feature, but talk about, the deeper subject and make connections. Leon as well is great at taking a feature that everybody's talking about and having something unique to say about it by applying his or her industry experience or career experience, or in the case of Leon, his big brain and his knowledge of physics and everything, and applying that to it and making some really interesting connections. That's why Leon's post about the LinkedIn acquisition just stood out from all these others, in that he had something to say and made connections that other people didn't. And you don't have to be a Leon with a big brain to make those connections. If you've been working for any time, especially if you have a focus on specific industries, like you work in the insurance industry a lot, take the new feature and document generation and talk about why does this matter in your niche? What are some examples of where this is a good fit, or lessons learned from not just here's this thing, but lessons learned. And that was a mistake I made early on, was update rollup 12 was coming out for CRM 2011. I had to be the first one to get it out there, but I realized this is kind of dumb because those kind of posts have no shelf life. Once you're at update rollup 13, nobody cares about your posts about update rollup 12 anymore. But the ones that have had staying power, like with CRM Tip of the Day, I'm amazed at the several posts from a year and a half ago. They're still getting comments. It's things that have real value, and things that are challenges that people are searching for. And I've actually had the experience where I searched for something. I had something about some kind of a missing field permission or something like that. I had an error. I searched for it and I found a tip of the day that I wrote about it. I've had that happen several times.
Yeah, definitely. That happens a lot. But, just going back to something you said about enjoying what you're doing, is I think the MVP award is one of those things that is once a year, right? You're getting it every year to recognize sort of your contribution to the community year after year. And it's really hard to keep getting the MVP award if you pretended that you were enjoying what you were doing to receive the first one. Like, I feel that if you find a niche and you happen to enjoy that, like, we were talking about Ulrich, he likes talking about charts, right? We're talking about Juka and how all of these people are super smart about explaining the so what. I call it so what factor, right? You not only tell me the what and what he does, but so what? Why would I care about that? I think that's the important thing. And if you enjoy explaining that side of it, you can do it consistently for years to come. It's just the people who say, I'm just going to go to the forums or post blogs every day for a year so I can get my MVP. I find it hard for you to remain an MVP for very much time if you're forcing yourself to do it just because you won the award. What do you think?
Right.
Look, there are two categories of people who are not MVPs, and I just wanted to express my view on that. There's one category that are people who don't want to be MVPs, right? Don't want to or cannot be MVP. And that goes with the character. To be an MVP, because you have to be visible. You have to have presence, right? You have to be an extrovert to a certain extent, right? I know few people who don't have this public participation, don't have the same level of involvement in any public media, would it be, Twitter or blog posts or Facebook, anything like that. But I've been blown away by their level of knowledge. Right, so there is this category of people who are like introverts. They don't want to do that. Right,
there's nothing wrong with that either.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there is the one, perhaps the most difficult category of people. You see them trying, and it's like, I watch myself trying to play guitar. It's like, if I'm watching it from outside, it reaches the point when you say, just stop it, right? Will you? It's enough. Okay, you prove your point. You know the way to hold it, but that's it. So the same applies here. It's like sometimes you read people and you see them trying. Sometimes they copy the content, whatever, rehash. Sometimes they're trying to produce the original one. And then you read it and you say, just, dude, not for you. I'm sorry. You can't do that. Right? It's either boring, comes across boring, not interesting, not exciting, in many, many different ways.
So you mentioned, right, there's a couple of people out there that, are super smart and all of that, but they wouldn't be, I guess, a good fit for being an MVP. But what about the people that are out there that are not MVPs, that are good candidates? Like, do you know a couple of people that are, in your eyes, like a George MVP or a Joel's MVP?
Yeah, definitely. There's several people that we've, and I don't want to mention any names specifically here because I don't want to call them out and embarrass them, but there's several people that I have nominated and have for various reasons haven't got it. We don't have, when you nominate somebody and they don't get it, you don't always have good feedback about why. Maybe it's they have a certain quota. Maybe there's other people who they view as being, more consistent participants, several reasons. And so the challenge is encouraging people that even if you don't get MVP, seeing reward in the journey, and there really is. And I think, the reality is the way the MVP program has morphed, we really don't get that much information ahead of time anymore with the open preview programs. I mean, you can be in the preview programs, you can have input to the product groups, or if you go to CRM UG, you can talk to Jujar as well. And so you have really almost as much access as we do. MVP, you do get a little bit more access in that you have access to emails, but there's no guarantee that anybody's going to respond to it. So that's where, again, I think, looking at it, if you're making a career in CRM, doing the things it takes to become an MVP, there's value in those things anyway. If you're writing a blog post and you're trying to compete for business, if people search for you and find out, oh, Gus really knows his stuff compared to Joe Blow or, Freddie or somebody like that who is not known or is, obviously doesn't know what they're talking about, then that's the kind of thing that there's value in that. And also, again, I maintain will make it easier, because the more you write blog posts or do podcasts or speak at your local CRMUG, the easier it gets. And so you'll gain confidence, that you'll use when you speak with clients. And so that's what I'm saying is, the people who I know who have been successful at getting MVP, and I think all of us, we're not driven primarily by wanting that, 3-letter initial MVP, whatever that's good for. It's a byproduct, and it's kind of like anything in life. If you're trying too hard and that's your end goal, once you get it, then what? Versus if you are motivated by really helping others grow, helping others to be better at what they do, that's when you'll get it. And even if you don't, you'll have a lot of reward from doing that hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. I mean, one question that I get all the time is, how do you find time to write all of these articles? And I don't think that people know that you don't have to write these super complex articles. Like Leon's articles are beautiful, right? They're awesome. You read them and he goes into detail, but there's also things like the CRM tip of the day that is short and straight to the point that are equally as valuable if that's exactly what you need. You just wanted to learn something really quick. But in addition to that, you don't have to write blogs and things like that to become an MVP. And one of the things that I learned also is that and I think about it when it comes to the podcast and videos for the YouTube channel that you were mentioning, George, is that sometimes writing doesn't really send the right message because people read things differently. And I shared 6 words with you guys on the chat. This is an exercise that I used to sort of show people how sometimes it's better to have it in audio than written. So, Joel, can you read the 6 words that I wrote, putting emphasis on the first word?
I didn't say you were beautiful.
Right. George, can you do it, putting emphasis on the second word?
I didn't say you were beautiful.
Joel, how about you with emphasis on the third word?
I didn't say you were beautiful.
Right, so you get the point. George, can you do the fourth word?
I didn't say Gus was beautiful.
Exactly. So those 6 words, you can read them in 6 different ways, depending on the emphasis that you put on it. So I think this is a good exercise to show people that you don't necessarily have to write to become an MVP or to be valuable to the community. If you just don't want to be an MVP, that recording things are also equally as valuable and sometimes easier.
Look, for people who are introverts, I always say, who by nature can't really do public speaking or don't want to, open source. I've been saying it all along. Open source is a good area where you can excel without necessarily communicating a lot.
Right. So you guys have been doing this for a long time. I think one of the questions I have is if you could go back in time, would you do something different in your career? And if so, why? Or what would you do?
Well, I think sometimes I think I would have learned more developer stuff, but then I realized that one of the reasons I'm not a developer and whenever I've done that kind of thing is I don't have the patience to be a developer a lot of times. Where thinking through a process and going step by step, I want to skip over steps. And so I think, there's a reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is I like the technology, but I equally like getting in front of people, talking to people. I get equal amounts of enjoyment. I'm not one to enjoy sitting in a room by myself writing code. So, but I think learning
that's
more
interesting
about that,
misconception about developers. So, Joel,
I'm not saying all developers are like that. I'm just generalizing.
Nah, we all like that. If it makes you feel better, I am in the room by myself right now. So,
yeah. So I would do that. I would also, looking back at some things that, I focused on, early in my CRM career that, turned out to be a waste of time, but you never can tell that. You never know which of the new features are going to be a hit versus silently go away, especially in the rapid release cycle. It seems like they're more willing to try stuff. And then if it doesn't float, quickly abandon it or move on. So
I was just thinking while Joel was talking, I was thinking, do you have anything, that I really would like to change in career-wise. And I can think of a lot of things going back, let's say 20 years. But going back in my CRM career, so to speak, which is last, 9, 10 years, I can't say that I would change drastically anything that happened. Yeah, I would probably be more successful. I know what to change with with the hindsight knowledge. I know what to change to make some of the projects successful. I had my share of failures over the years, so I really now know how I would have approached it so it wouldn't have been a failure. But apart from tweaking here and there my knowledge and say, yeah, I would have done this different, fundamentally, I probably wouldn't change a thing. The way I come to learn CRM, the way I've come to using it, the way I've been using it, and the way we've been creating things for CRM, I probably would buy myself few shares if I knew what to buy, but other than that, nah. I'm good.
I would say that in my career, I've learned as much from the bad jobs as the good ones. And
Probably
if
more.
I hadn't had the bad jobs, yeah, probably more. If I hadn't had the bad jobs, I wouldn't have learned what I'm not good at and what I don't enjoy doing. And that's where I kind of smirk when I hear 20-some-year-old kids these days. And now that I'm in my 40s, I can call them kids, basically wanting the dream job right when they get out of college. And, just the reality of that is, you don't know what you're good at yet. And you need to have some crappy jobs so you can learn what you're really
with Elevate, where they pay in peanuts.
Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah, no. Before you get your dream job at Elevate, you've got to work at.
Alexa, right?
Yeah, you got to sell copiers. That was my first job out of college. I hated copiers. Well, I had dreams about copiers, and then I knew I needed to move into a different career.
You brought up a good point, which is that sometimes from bad jobs or bad projects or bad experiences, you end up learning more than the ones that go on without a hitch. So can you guys share sort of like a funny story from a project in the past that maybe didn't go as planned?
I got one. This was probably one of my first projects, and we were working for a financial services company where, very image conscious, and I was training the young receptionist on how to use this add-on that a offshore development company had built, and this was we were a small company at that time, and so this was an outsourced thing. And one thing I've learned when working with offshore developers is sometimes you have to be very clear, and there's they take things very literally sometimes. Sometimes it's a language thing, or I'm not sure, but it was fashioned after the the direct mail feature in CRM, and this was CRM version 3 at the time, where basically you had the choice of send email to selected recipient, send to all on this page, and send to all on all pages. And so understanding that, that in CRM, that meant all pages of the current view, and then this was a custom thing to send bulk emails with attachments. And so she made a template that had her vacation picture in it, I think Hawaii or something like that. And I said, okay, make a view and only put yourself in it, your Gmail address or whatever. And now, okay, you can really click any of these buttons because, you're the only one in this view. So she picked the all records on all pages and hit send. And this was December 23rd. I remember the date because it was right before Christmas. All of a sudden, her email box starts filling up with, I will be out of the office for Christmas. I'll be out of the office for the holidays. It went to everybody in their database. And that was probably one of the most uncomfortable times I've had on a project. And just wanted to crawl under the desk and disappear. And so all their clients got a picture of this nice young lady's vacation photo.
Nice. How are you, George?
Biggest failed projects that I've been doing. Remember, Joe, quite a few episodes back, we were talking about built-in features in CRM, and I mentioned that I used invoices, and every time I did use invoices, I wished I didn't. So there were a few projects where I I don't know, was it stubbornness or inexperience or implicit trust to wisdom of Microsoft developers who, every time I started, I would say, like, I don't believe they would do stupid thing like that, right? There must be something else. There must be some deep meaning to those invoices and the way they link to orders and things like that. And every time I was proven wrong. So the couple times we managed to salvage the projects, it turned out to be okay, not the best, but okay, working, fine, whatever. But one was just a complete disaster. In the end, it's just I tried. And speaking of things like we would change, it's one of those things. If I go back to that project, I would say from my outset, look, forget about, except contacts and accounts, forget about anything else you see in CRM, right? Just forget about it. Let's work our way up for that. It was very highly customized environment in the sense of business requirements. Very specialized business requirements. The way they do invoicing, it's like you can have one quote that would end up as 3 invoices to 4 different organizations or something like that. Anyway, so it was one complete disaster. So now every time I approach the project where invoicing is required, I step back and I have a long and hard look at it. And more often than not, I'd say, no, thank you. I'll do my own invoicing.
That's one of those things where if you run anything, anybody remotely connected with that feature in CRM is long gone. And so it's like, it is what it is. It's not changing. So you may as well build a custom one. I've learned a lot from my mistakes and paying the price for them. So, for example, I had to work one time half of my Christmas holiday recreating entities that I had created as organization owned before I really understood what that really meant. And then had a security requirement come in that, oh, crap, we got to make this, have user security on this. Okay, Gus, you've asked us. I want to hear one of yours.
I think, like you, I've had several things in the past that I learned a lot from. I think the worst one, if I had to pick one, is the first CRM partner I work with. I was, I think, employee number 3 on the practice. So when you have a practice that is so small, I think you tend to do a lot of things. And one of the things that I did, and it was very, very, I guess, early on my career within that partner, which was actually my first CRM professional job, because before that I was just a CRM admin. But that was the first time I moved into a technical lead, is that we went to Europe to deploy a project for a customer there. And I was in Amsterdam. It was my first time in Amsterdam, and the project was going well. And they had this idea about, well, since we're here, let's go and visit another customer that is an old project that was done before I came into the company. And they're having some problems, especially technical problems, and let's go ahead and stop by and talk to them. So yeah, I suit up and we show up at the customer. There were 2 of us. One was a consultant. It was more like a functional consultant, and I went there as I was a technical lead dealing with servers and, databases and firewalls and basically infrastructure, more than anything. We deployed only CRM on premise. And I mean, we sat in this conference room, at this company. And I mean, the guy who was leading the meeting, which, I mean, for me, it was pretty informal, but for him, it was pretty formal. Proceeded to pretty much grill me in all of these technical issues or mistakes that were made on the project way before I started the company. And, sort of like the partner that I worked for gave him the impression that I was sort of the technical decision maker for the company, and I was there to resolve their problems regardless. And they put me in a really bad spot. So I don't think I had ever been into a position where somebody's asking me, like, okay, why do you rename all of our groups in Active Directory and not correct them on the CRM database, right? So you can point to the right groups. And I'm just sitting there like, this happened way before I started. I don't know. I can look into that. Okay. So he would make a note and then move on to the next one. Why did you decided to register the plugins on the server instead of the database, and then suggested that we do a migration of servers, and now nothing works? Well, I don't know. I guess I was stupid to suggest it. Like I wasn't even at the company, right? The guy I replaced did that. So it was just a really, really awkward position. But I learned a lot from that. I think I prepare better for meetings, that's for sure. And sort of understand what's going to be my job when I show up into a meeting. And, if that customer is hearing this podcast, I would love to, to say, I'm sorry. I wish I had a better plan when I did that. But that was pretty horrible. It was 2 hours of agony for me. That's by far the worst.
Now I know why Gus avoids any technical conversation with me.
Oh, please. We are not at the same level. All right. So a couple of questions just to wrap up, you mentioned that, Joel, earlier, you mentioned that you listen to obviously podcasts when you travel and all of that. And a lot of people listen to this podcast and other podcasts as well, but they might not be recommending this to other people. So why would someone recommend this podcast to people who haven't listened to it yet?
Well, I would say for one thing, there's not a lot of dynamic CRM podcasts. There's a couple of them out there, but we are the most regular. And also, I think we have again, nothing against the other podcasts. They're doing great work as well. But I think having a mix of multiple people, I think the podcasts I like listening to, with the rare exceptions, I think like the hardcore history ones, for example, if you're really good at this, but most of us are not at the level where we can have a captivating kind of thing where we're just one person talking. And so I think the variety with George as the developer, me having kind of the architect background, and Sean has a very strong consulting / business analyst type background as well. I think we have a very well-rounded as well. And I think having guests and other things like yourself on, just add a lot of variety. And I always ask myself when I added the podcast, is this something that I would like to listen to? Because I think if it's not, I don't want to put it out there. So that's the determinant of what I edit out. If there's a conversation that is just going on and not stopping, I'll either cut it out or cut it short to try and make it worth your while to listen to. So I would say if you are interested in CRM, if you like podcasts, and you also want to have a way maybe that's not too time consuming to catch up on what's new and that type of thing, that's really what we're trying to do here.
How about you, George? Any other words to encourage people to recommend this podcast?
We're trying to be fun, bit lighter than some of the podcasts I know. Joel is right. It coming back to my point where you see people trying something and all you want to say is just stop it. I hope we're not at that point, and having someone who's really like doing it, like Joel, definitely helps. Who's well-rounded, like Sean, definitely helps. I don't know what do I add to the podcast, but I hope I do add something. I thought my SDK series were a hit.
In the first couple episodes, George actually read code. I mean, really read code.
Oh, God.
And said curly bracket, end bracket. And we thought it was fun, but then we got comments. Can you please have George stop reading code? And I was just imagining there was one guy out there, and he's always got to be one guy, and he's like sitting there listening, and he's typing this in as George is saying it.
Oh God!
I mean, it's tough to match. Obviously, you mentioned Dan Carlin and Hardcore History, right? Where the episodes are over 5 hours, and you can't stop listening. I mean, it's so awesome. But are there any other podcasts that you guys listen to that they don't have to be CRM related, but anything else that you're listening to that you like and maybe recommend to other people?
Well, I listened to what's the Malcolm Gladwell series that they've had lately. It's Revisionist History is an interesting one, and it takes an interesting twist on things. I listened to some public radio ones. There's one called The Art of Manliness that has some interesting things, and interviews some interesting stuff. Like that's where I heard the interview with the guy who wrote the Extreme Ownership book.
Nice.
Yeah, and things
Jocko
like that.
Willink.
Yeah, Jocko. And so I got the Eastern Border one you recommended on Facebook as well. So I got a number of them. I have some technology ones, but a lot of technology like This Week in Tech and that type of thing irritate me more than anything because they just become cheerleaders for the latest thing in technology, like Pokemon Go. We love Pokemon Go and all this. And it's just it's kind of like entertainment tonight for the technology world.
Exactly. You mentioned that Art of Manliness, and I started thinking about Guyan, our fellow MVP. That guy is by far the manliest MVP that we have. Flies helicopters. I think he fights alligators over there in New Zealand or whatever he is. And you guys should bring Guyan as a guest in this podcast.
I'm going to be in New Zealand next week, so I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, you have to make it happen. How about you, George? Anything else you recommend?
Look, listen to a couple technical podcasts that I could recommend. The one is for developers, Hansel Minutes. That's just amazing. The guy, he works for Microsoft now, but I don't believe he was working for Microsoft when he started anyway. So he's like episode 500 something. He's been doing it for 10 years. Would you believe that? And he gets guests like developers and very unusual ones. I enjoyed the episodes, for example, when they were talking about unit testing or code testing at NASA. Right, they've got woman who's in charge of. He's got woman as a guest who's in charge of code testing at NASA.
Is that the movie they're making? I saw they're making a movie about women working at NASA or whatever, writing code or something.
That just happened
or
to
doing
be
math, I think.
Yeah, it just happened to be. But he invites all sort of different people talking about from technology, from most of them from technology, doing their own thing, like a lot of open source. He gets guests from Microsoft and so on. But he's incredibly good at it. His episodes are quite short, like half an hour, unlike ours, which drags for hours and hours. But he's very good at what he does. So for technology, like I really enjoy his podcast. This is my go-to podcast when I have half an hour to listen to. And earlier, I referred to podcasts that I've been enjoying lately. Security one, risky.biz. The guys talking about security and they know what they're talking about. So very enjoyable. They're talking about white hat hacking, exploits, bugs discovered, tools in security, Australian census failure, and things like that. So all things security related. Very interesting. Most of the stuff flies over my head when they start talking about TCP/IP stack and things like that. It sort of flies over my head, but thoroughly enjoyable podcasts. So in terms of non-technical ones, I really got into serial and undisclosed. That's kind of area that I found myself gravitating to. The law and legal, I would say, idiosyncrasies of American legal system.
Yeah.
So,
playing judge too, right? So because you're listening to it and you're like, what would I say? What would I do if I was in the jury? How would I take that?
That's that too. Yeah, that's quite interesting. So these are podcasts I would say I listen to from time to time. But my driving is not as long as your commuting, guys. So my drive is maximum to my office is like 15 minutes. So I don't have time to listen while I'm driving. And if I start listening when I'm like on a plane, I just fall asleep. That's the problem. So it's difficult for me to, carve time of the day when I can concentrate and listen. And if podcast is engaging, do you guys find yourself that you can't really multitask when you listen to a podcast? If it's a good podcast, you can do stuff like driving, which by that time doesn't require any mental efforts on your part. You're just doing it on autopilot. But I found myself like I can't text or read Facebook or do something else and listen to the podcast at the same time. If podcast is any good, it does require for me to concentrate on listening to it.
Yeah, that's why the car is the main place I will listen, or if I'm going on a walk or something, or at the gym or something.
Yeah, for me, there are a couple of podcasts that I listen to that they post them on YouTube. They record themselves recording the podcast, something that you guys should look into, by the way, because it's very engaging, right? To see people sort of how their body language and how they react to things. It's always good. So especially if I'm listening to the podcast while I'm watching at the same time, it's impossible to multitask. It's just too hard.
Yeah, one of the reasons we haven't really done the video is editing. When you're strictly audio, you can edit things much more subtly, where I'll have a string of and I can cut all that out, and it sounds like I have a cohesive thought and end my sentence with a period. Whereas if you saw us live, you know that this is really an hour and a half long, and the edits would be much more obvious. And it's also, in my opinion, more work. And I have such limited time that sometimes it's a week. It's like a week after we record it to when I actually can edit it.
So lastly for me is just, do you guys have any personal or professional announcements, like any place you're going to be at, conferences, things coming up you want to share with people so they can meet you in person maybe?
Well, I'm going to be at the Hitachi Customer Conference the first week of September and then of October, and then the week after that, I think we'll all be at CRMUG, and I'm going to be presenting about I have a session about Outlook. I've got one I'm doing Jim Steger, a fellow MVP from Sonoma Partners, about mobile, and I've got a third one which is slipping my mind right now. I better get ready for that one.
I'm going to be at Hitachi, sponsoring drinks at the conference. So I'm kind
if
of.
You're going to be sponsoring happy hour. You need to smile more, George.
I'm smiling right now, so you can take me on camera. But sponsoring that, and then taking plane to Tampa, where we're going to be at CRMUG. At CRMUG, I'm going to be teaching a couple of classes before the conference. So we're going to be dealing with the best of advanced customizations and project services. So there's 2 classes I'm going to teach before the conference. And then throughout the conference, I'm sponsoring. So I'm going to be sitting there smiling and explaining to people. We bring in, the WordPress integration to CRM. So we went a lot of open source. So we open sourced big chunks of our work. So we're doing some goodies. So you can get a lot of stuff for free. And I guess come and stop by. I don't remember the booth name. I think it's like 1033. Come and stop by and say hello.
So when we have a conference in Atlanta, Gus has to take everybody shooting. Since we're going to Tampa, home of Chris Cognetta, what does he have to do for us when we go there?
I have no clue.
I think Gus needs to take us driving, not shooting this time.
Yeah, driving, but one by one, because only one person fits on that thing. But
are you talking about yourself?
That would be the focus.
Last time I was in Tampa, I almost had an osprey hit me hit my car. Driving by the ocean there. You see him come swooping out carrying a fish, and it's a big sized fish. I thought he was going to drop the fish on my car.
That would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah. So are you going to be driving your race car to CRMUG?
Man, if I could get a guarantee of like a few weeks of no rain, I would love to. That would be pretty awesome. But no, I wish I could drive that thing more often, but it's just so hard to get 0% chance of rain for more than 2 hours at a time.
Come here to Australia. Bring your car. I know places in Australia guaranteed to be no rain for the next 360
I can
days.
imagine how miserable it is for people that own atoms in like Oregon or
Seattle
or something like that. It would be horrendous.
Go to Arizona or something.
This has been CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast. You can hear previous episodes on our website, crm.audio. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio, or leave us a comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/CRM podcast. If you have any topic suggestions or questions that you would like for us to answer on a future episode, please drop us an email at voice@crm.audio. Special thanks to Dale Simmons for our theme music. Go check out his website, dalesimmons.com. Please join us next time on CRM Audio.